Which is the best national team from each decade of football? That's the question that took me through the entire history of international football, decade by decade, to figure out which team was the best in every era of the game. Judged on the biggest trophies, the World Cup, the Euros, the Copa América, and on the legacy these historic teams left behind. At the very end, I'll show you which country has been the best national team of a decade more times than anyone else. Ready? Let's get started. The first decade of the 20th century, from 1901 to 1910, England. The decade that gave football its shape. No World Cup yet, no Euros, no Copa América. The British Home Championship was the only international competition that mattered. England against Scotland, Wales, and Ireland, and England won it 7 times this decade. Then they took Olympic gold in 1908 in London, beating Denmark 2-0 in the final, with a Great Britain side that was almost entirely English. Honorable mentions to Scotland and Wales, the only other nations playing competitive international football at any real level. Football was a British game in 1910, and England were the kings of it. 1911-1920 Uruguay. The world's first proper continental tournament arrives, the Copa América, launched in 1916 in Argentina. And from the moment it began, one country owned it, Uruguay. They won the inaugural edition. They won the next one. They won it again in 1920. 3 Copa Americas in 4 years. Honorable mentions go to Argentina, the host of that first tournament, who finished second almost every single time. Brazil comes in third, a little further behind. While Europe was tearing itself apart during World War I, South America was quietly building international football, and Uruguay was running the whole thing. And if you enjoy football content like this, consider subscribing and leaving a like. It really helps support my work. Well, now, 1920s, Uruguay. Again, if you thought the previous decade belonged to Uruguay, wait until you see this one. This was the era of Jose Leandro Andrade, Hector Scarron, and Jose Nasazi, 3 giants of Uruguayan football. They won 2 Olympic gold medals, Paris 1924 and Amsterdam 1928, playing a style of passing football Europe had honestly never seen before. And at that time, the Olympics were considered the biggest football competition in the world, because the World Cup didn't even exist yet. It was only created in 1930. Then add 3 more Copa Americas on top of that, and in 1930, they hosted and won the very first FIFA World Cup, beating Argentina 4-2 in the final in Montevideo, a win that didn't just make them champions, but forever made Uruguay the first name in World Cup history. Honorable mentions go to Argentina, once again finishing second. By the way, they were runners-up to Uruguay at the 1928 Olympics and again at the first World Cup in 1930. Scotland comes in at number 3, after winning the British Home Championship 7 times in the 20s. Next decade, the 1930s Italy. Power swings to Europe. Vittorio Pozzo's side, led by legends like Giuseppe Meazza, Silvio Paiola, and Giovanni Ferrari, won the 1934 World Cup at home, beating Czechoslovakia 2-1 in extra time in Rome. 4 years later in France, they did it again, beating Hungary 4-2 in the final to become the first nation in history to defend a World Cup. They also took Olympic gold in Berlin in 1936 in between. 2 World Cups, 1 Olympic gold, all inside 6 years. There was nothing close. Honorable mentions go to Argentina at number 2. They won the Copa América in 1937, and Austria at number 3, with their famous Wonder Team, one of the most admired sides of that era. But this decade belongs completely to the Azzurri, now one of the bloodiest decades in human history. The 1940s Argentina. The 40s are football's strangest decade. The World Cup was cancelled in 42 and 46 because of World War II. And the only major tournament that kept running was the South American Championship, and one team conquered it, Argentina. Led by legends like Jose Manuel Moreno, Adolfo Pedernera, and Norberto Mendez, Argentina won 4 Copa Americas in 7 years, 1941, 45, 46, 47, playing a style so dominant that even Uruguay and Brazil couldn't get near them. Now here's the catch you're already shouting at the screen. Argentina skipped the 1950 World Cup completely. The main reason was chaos inside Argentine football, a players' strike, top stars leaving for Colombia, and political tension with Brazil's football authorities. So one of the best teams of the era simply stayed home, and Uruguay won that one, the Maracanazo, 2-1 against Brazil in front of 200,000 stunned Brazilians in Rio. Biggest trophy of the decade by miles. So why isn't Uruguay number 1? Because a decade ranking isn't a single tournament ranking. Argentina were the best team in the world for 9 straight years. Uruguay were the best team in the world for one afternoon. So, honorable mentions go to Uruguay at number 2 and Brazil at number 3. But the team that truly ran football across the entire decade was Argentina. Now, the 1950s Brazil, the first decade where football starts to look like the game we know today. And number 1 is Brazil. The reason is one tournament, the 1958 World Cup in Sweden. Brazil arrived with a 17-year-old Pelé, a young Garrincha tearing defenses apart, Didi running the midfield, and they beat the hosts 5-2 in the final. That was the moment Brazilian football announced itself to the world as the most beautiful version of the game ever played. The legacy of that team alone is bigger than most countries' entire football history. Behind them, West Germany at number 2, winners of the 1954 World Cup, the Miracle of Bern, beating Hungary 3-2 from 2-0 down. And then Hungary take number 3. And yes, I know exactly what you want to say. Argentina won 3 Copa Americas in this decade. They did. On title count alone, Argentina probably should be number 3. But the criteria includes legacy, and legacy is where Hungary completely shut the argument down. The magical Magyars Puskás, Kocsis, Hajduk Kuti went 31 matches unbeaten between 1950 and 54. They reinvented how the center-forward position worked. They walked into Wembley in 53 and beat England 6-3 on English soil, the first foreign team in history to do it. Then they did it again in Budapest the next year. 7-1. Argentina, with respect, won regional tournaments. Hungary changed the sport. That's the gap. Next decade. The 1960s Brazil again. If the 50s was Brazil announcing itself, the 60s is Brazil dominating the planet. 2 World Cups in this decade. 2. 1962 in Chile. Brazil won despite losing Pelé to injury in the second game, because Garrincha simply took the entire tournament onto his back and walked off with it. They beat Czechoslovakia 3-1 in the final. 8 years later, 1970 in Mexico, they came back with what most people still consider the greatest team that has ever played football. Pelé, Tostão, Gerson, Rivellino, Jairzinho, who scored in every single game of the tournament group stage all the way to the final, and Carlos Alberto capping it off with that 4th goal against Italy in the 4-1 win, the goal that ended every argument about what football could look like at its highest level. 3 World Cups in 12 years for Brazil, and they were allowed to keep the original Jules Rimet trophy permanently because of it. There has never been a decade where one country was so far ahead of everyone else stylistically. Honorable mentions go to England at number 2. They won the 1966 World Cup at Wembley. And Italy at number 3, after winning Euro 1968 and finishing runner-up at the 1970 World Cup. Now, the 1970s Germany. Football's center of gravity shifts back to Europe, and specifically to West Germany. Helmut Schön's side won the 1974 World Cup at home, beating the Netherlands 2-1 in a final where they had to come back from a goal down inside 2 minutes. They also won the European Championship in 1972 with one of the most beautifully balanced sides Europe has ever produced. Beckenbauer behind, Müller in front, Netzer pulling the strings. They reached the Euro final again in 76, losing on penalties to Czechoslovakia in one of the most famous shootouts in history. Antonín Panenka chipping the winner straight down the middle, which is literally where the Panenka penalty comes from. And then they took the Euro again in 1980. 1 World Cup, 2 European titles, 1 runner-up. Nobody else in the world matched that. Argentina come in at number 2. They won the 1978 World Cup at home, with Mario Kempes leading the line. Brilliant team, controversial tournament, but a title is a title. And at number 3, we have the Netherlands, maybe the greatest team in football history that never actually lifted the trophy. This was Johan Cruyff. This was total football. This was a team that changed how the game was played. They reached 2 World Cup finals in a row, in 74 and 78, but lost both of them. It's one of the most fascinating what-ifs in football history. Them again. The 1980s, Germany. This is the decade where it could have been 3 different countries, but it ends up being West Germany again, and only just. The Germans played in 3 World Cup finals in a row, 1982, 86, and 90. They lost the first 2, to Italy 3-1 and to Argentina 3-2, but they won the third, beating Argentina 1-0 in Rome with a late penalty from Andreas Brehme. 3 consecutive finals. That alone is a feat nobody else has matched. They also reached the Euro 88 semifinals at home, losing to the eventual winners, the Netherlands. Argentina sit at number 2, and this is where it gets interesting, because they have Diego Maradona winning the 1986 World Cup in Mexico almost on his own. The hand of God. The goal of the century, both in the same quarterfinal against England, plus a runner-up finish in '90. If we ranked purely on individual brilliance, Maradona's '80s Argentina might be top of the list. But criteria is criteria. 3 finals and 1 trophy beats 1 trophy and 1 runner-up. And Italy at number 3. World Cup winners in 1982 on the back of Paolo Rossi's outrageous tournament. France's Platini generation, by the way, missed the podium despite winning Euro 84. A reminder of just how stacked this decade was. Now, the 1990s Brazil. The 90s belong to Brazil again, but it's the closest call we've had so far. Brazil won the 1994 World Cup in the United States, led by Romario and Bebeto, beating Italy on penalties in the Rose Bowl in Pasadena and ending a 24-year title drought. 4 years later, they reached the final again in France, losing 3-0 to the hosts in one of the strangest finals ever played, with Ronaldo Nazario dealing with serious health issues just hours before kickoff. Brazil also had Ronaldo and Romario together in '97, and Ronaldo and Rivaldo shining in that same period too. And by '99, a young Ronaldinho was already starting to announce himself to the world. They also won the Copa América in '97 and '99, and lifted the very first FIFA Confederations Cup in '97. 5 major trophies in a single decade. As an honorable mention, France come in at number 2, and they were genuinely close. They won the World Cup at home in '98, 3-0 against Brazil, and then went straight on to win Euro 2000, becoming the first country in history to hold the World Cup and the European Championship at the same time. 2 of the biggest trophies in football, back-to-back. The only reason they don't take the top spot is volume. Brazil simply won more. Another honorable mention goes to Argentina at number 3. Batistuta was scoring for fun, the Redondo generation was just beginning, and they won 2 Copa Americas in '91 and '93, but they couldn't translate it into anything bigger. The 90s were the moment Brazilian football reached its commercial and competitive peak. The 2000s Brazil, again. If the 90s were peak Brazil, the 2000s are peak prolific Brazil. They won the 2002 World Cup in Korea and Japan with the famous 3 R's frontline, Ronaldo, Rivaldo, Ronaldinho, and Ronaldo Nazario ending the tournament as top scorer with 8 goals, finally exorcising the demons of '98. 2 Copa Americas in 2004 and 2007. 2 Confederations Cups in 2005 and 2009. 5 major trophies again. Brazil were the best at everything except the European Championship that they don't get to play in. But here is the interesting part. The decade ended with the rise of Spain, and in Spain sit at number 2. Tiki-taka. Xavi Hernandez, Iniesta, Xabi Alonso, Sergio Ramos, Iker Casillas. Spain won Euro 2008, ending a 44-year title drought, and then took the 2010 World Cup in South Africa, becoming the first European nation ever to win a World Cup outside Europe. The main reason Brazil takes number 1 is consistency. They were strong throughout the entire decade, while Spain only truly exploded in 2008. And Italy at number 3. They won the 2006 World Cup in Germany, beating France on penalties in the famous Zidane headbutt final. The 2010s Germany. The 2010s, and number 1 is Germany. But this is the decade where the criteria really earn their keep, because France will run them very close. Germany won the 2014 World Cup in Brazil, and they did it by inflicting the most humiliating defeat in the host nation's history, 7-1 in the semifinal in Belo Horizonte. 5 goals in 18 first-half minutes. Then they beat Argentina 1-0 in the final at the Maracana. And they didn't stop there. They also made 2 Euro semifinals in 2012 and 2016. And in 2017, they won the FIFA Confederations Cup with a younger, almost experimental squad, which showed just how deep that German generation really was. This was a complete era of football intelligence. Müller, Kroos, Ozil, Schweinsteiger, Lahm, Neuer. France come in at number 2, and yes, they won the 2018 World Cup in Russia and finished runners-up at Euro 16. By raw title quantity, it's basically level. The reason Germany still edge it on legacy is sustained dominance. 3 deep tournament runs at the highest level. A World Cup title, a Confederations Cup title, and a tactical revolution that influenced every modern coaching course on earth. Portugal at number 3. Cristiano Ronaldo's generation finally won something. Euro 2016 against France, in France, with the Portuguese number 7 going off injured in the final and watching from the touchline as Ader scored the winner in extra time. They also won the UEFA Nations League in 2019 and the last decade. The 2020s, Argentina. The current decade still unfinished, 5 years in, with the World Cup in North America still to come this summer. And the team at number 1 is Argentina. Lionel Messi finally got his hands on the trophy. The 22 World Cup in Qatar, beating France in the final 3-3 after extra time, 4-2 on penalties, in what most people now call the greatest World Cup final ever played. But this wasn't just Messi's story. Angel Di Maria was massive in the biggest moments, scoring in the Copa América final against Brazil in 2021 and again in the World Cup final against France. And then you had Dibu Martinez, who became the emotional wall of this team, saving Argentina in the final minutes against France and then delivering again in the penalty shootout. They also won the Copa América in 2021 in Brazil, at the Maracanã of all places, and again in 2024 in the United States. Honorable mentions go to Spain at number 2, winners of Euro 2024 and the Europe Nations League in 2023, and France at number 3, runners-up in Qatar and semi-finalists at the Euros. The story of this decade isn't done yet, but for now, Argentina rules it, the final ranking. So let's add it up, 13 decades of football, one country at the top of each. And here is the leaderboard. Brazil, 4 times number 1, 1951 to 60, 61 to 70, 91 to 2001 to 2010. 2 consecutive eras of total domination. Germany, 3 times number 1, the 70s, the 80s, and the 2010s. Different generations, same machine. And then a tie at number 3, Argentina and Uruguay, both at the top of 2 decades each. Uruguay ruled the entire early 20th century. Argentina took the 40s and the current one. And Italy and England 1 decade each, or none at all for everyone else. So when people argue about who the greatest football nation in history really is, the trophy count puts Brazil narrowly ahead. Do you agree with the picks? I want to hear your opinion in the comments. Drop your own list of the best team from each decade down below. If you enjoyed this, there's another World Cup list on the channel that goes even deeper into football history. Links on the screen. See you in the next video.